Hello, this is episode 44, and I'm Cherie Burton. Welcome to Women Seeking Wholeness. I'm kind of on a high after an awesome Stand, Speak, Shine retreat over the weekend with some beautiful women who just had this depth and wisdom and wellspring of compassion and drive and purpose, and it was super cool. We had it was cozier than last year's retreat, and I'm processing a lot of the things that they taught me. I mean, I facilitate these things and then I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm the one that received the mostest. I was the hostess with the mostest because they are the ones who truly heal, teach, bless, and support me in the things that I am dealing with in my life. So we just had this beautiful gathering and I'm really excited. In the coming days and weeks, I'll be announcing my Stand, Speak, Shine school, which will be an online 3-month course that helps facilitate your own accessing of the queendom within and stepping into your soul purpose and calling and just finding your own stance, your own stand in this lifetime, your own speak, your own soul speak, and of course your shine, your aura, your magnificence, your way of being. And just, I'm so passionate about giving women that permission to step into that and guiding and facilitating that. So that'll be really exciting. So I'll be talking a little bit more about that as we move along through the coming holidays, because I just think 2020, it's the year of the woman. I mean, the number 2, a lot of you know my patterning around that and how that shows up for me. And I just feel like, and I've heard other thought leaders talk about this, like this, we're entering the new era of the feminine, and the fact that there's 2 twos in next year's, 2020. I've heard it also said that it's going to be perfect 2020 vision. Like people are going to be really, really waking up. So hope you'll ride that wave with me and choose to journey with me. I'll have more information on that coming up. Let's move into this discussion with Leah Young. I'll explain in the context of our interview how we connected, because it was beautiful how we found each other and just realized we had so much in common around the language of the soul, and how that and the honoring of that is so pivotal in our life journey and showing up in the space of bravery. Brene Brown talks a lot about braving the wilderness and showing vulnerability and all these things. And we hear people talk about it, we think, oh my gosh, that's so inspiring. But when you actually meet people who have gone into the depths of the wilderness to be that lone voice, it's magnanimous. It's awesome. So Leah is basically a woman who has done that, and she's a mother of 4 beautiful daughters. She's a businesswoman, and as you'll hear from her, has gone through a major life transition from religion into spirituality as the way she sees her soul speak bringing her to, or that magnetism from the universe. There's many ways we could define this, but for her, it was a transition that was needful, because now she stands in a place of power as a transition coach to facilitate those awakenings and support in others. And you'll see her way is very intuitive. It's very thoughtful. And we just have the greatest discussion about what it means to let go of the attachment to the voices of others and stand in the space of honoring your own soul with beauty, compassion, and wisdom. Yeah, I'm so grateful that you are gifting us with the presence of you today, because I shared this on Facebook this morning when I woke up knowing that we were going to be doing this interview today. I just had such a strong upwelling of peace and clarity and excitement. Like, ooh, this is going to be a good one.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I'm excited.
Yeah. Well, I just want to share with our listeners kind of how I connected with you. And initially, I was really moved by your story, which actually became quite visible in the Mormon community. I would say more so the post-Mormon community, or the transitioning Mormon community, of your very prolific and public excommunication from the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, along with your husband. And the reason I was so compelled to listen to, I don't know, 4, 5, or 6 hours of that interview that you did on Mormon Stories was because of your integrity. And I didn't just listen to it. I watched the YouTube. In fact, I was in Hawaii with my husband, Jeff, And we were riveted. We were in our hotel in Hawaii. We were supposed to go on this excursion with our group. And we were like, no. And we watched all hours of it in Hawaii. And just inserting ourselves into the pain, the raw human emotion, and then your beautiful daughter, Brinley, and just the exquisite way that you've raised her to express her soul. So that was what drew me to you. And then about a certain amount of time lapsed. And then I think you reached out to me. And I can't remember because of my divorce, you reached out and just offered a private message of compassion. And then you started listening to my podcast, and then you and I started bouncing ideas off each other and talking to each other. And so that is how we connected. And you know this about me. I do not believe there are any chance encounters. I believe when it's time for souls to connect, they connect. And that is the case with us. And here you are, sharing and gifting your journey with us.
Thank you. Yeah, I really felt the same in my life, and I'm growing more attuned to recognizing that things happen for a reason. So I've really been touched by your podcast. I have shared it with so many people. I've listened to so many of the episodes, and just thank you for the work you're doing. It's really enriched my life.
Oh, thank you. That means a lot to me. I want to start with your journey. And, I've just sort of set the stage for your transition out of the Mormon church and your family. And just to kind of put that into, I know how painful it was because I listened to the entire context of your journey through that other podcast. But maybe for this, for our purposes here, because it really, you and I know, it's really not about the transitioning out of a church or leaving a religion, as much as this is a journey of awakening your soul voice and your expansion as a soul. And so it's such a sacred journey. It's such a very prolific and monumental shift to come into a space of listening and going within and understanding why things happen the way that they do. And sometimes these life-altering transitions give us that gift. So share with us maybe just a little snapshot through that journey of your life to that point of transition.
Yeah. So I grew up in Provo, Utah, just as a very much engaged member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. I moved out to Los Angeles, where I was a birth and postpartum doula, and met my husband, and we were married when I was in the ripe old age of 20. And we were active, fully active, fully engaged members of the church for the next really 16 and a half years of our marriage. While he was in medical school and residency, we had 4 girls and raised them very much engaged in the church. We love so much about the church and our experience there. As I reflect back, there are several tipping points for me that I feel now were awakening messages in my journey for my soul, where I started really evaluating what was happening, but not from a lens of unworthiness or shame, more from a lens of, I really think I need to trust what I'm feeling and something doesn't quite feel right. And one of those experiences was when my husband was called into a calling as the Young Men's president. We're just in a very busy time of our lives. At that point, I had just started a home-based business that had really taken off, and I was engaged in that. And that felt really good after sort of supporting him in his journey so fully through medical school and residency. To have something that I was engaged in a meaningful way was important to me. And then, of course, having 4 kids. And he had recently had his boss, the head physician of his group, pass away. And Cody was left with certain responsibilities that went above and beyond the already very long work schedule that he had. And so we were called in, and he was called into this calling. And our church leader, which is called the bishop at the time, had said, this is what God has, shared with us that you ought to do. And at that time, I was sobbing. I just felt a stabbing in my heart, like, this isn't making sense to me right now, because there's been a lot of sacrifice for our commitment to the church and to this gospel. And I'm okay with sacrifice, but at that time for our family, it felt in direct opposition to what would be supportive of our marriage, our children. And I really struggled with that, just feeling something wasn't right. And it really wasn't right. And navigating that was challenging because of the programming of, this is what God has told you to do. So being able to say, I'm not quite sure about that, was a huge step for me. And really tricky, because I want to talk about so many other things. I'll just leave it at that. That was sort of the first question I had, is my soul is feeling really unsettled with this. And I shared that with the bishop, and I shared that with my husband. But ultimately, knowing that this is what at the time I believed God had commanded that my husband do, I felt that if I didn't support him, that wouldn't be the right thing. So I went against my inner voice, and I said, okay, I don't really know what the other options are. So he took that calling, and that really ushered in some of the hardest and most painful experiences, I think, in our marriage, because I was going on a journey of asking myself, where are the women? Where is Heavenly Mother? And there were some very pivotal moments. I would listen to conference talks often, kind of like now I listen to a lot of podcasts and a lot of audiobooks, but I was very committed. I think I'm just a committed person in whatever I'm doing. So I was very committed to listening to, I remember being on a bike ride, for example. I was on a bike ride and I was listening to a general conference talk, and it was by Elder Uchtdorf, and he was one of my favorites. He's just a wonderful person. And him talking about Heavenly Father and talking about the family and talking about how as men and women, we need to strive to become like our Heavenly Father. And I just was weeping. I just was weeping because I just thought, why don't you see it? And I spoke out loud, why don't you see it? Something is off here. Something is not right here. And so these were some of the awakenings I was feeling. I was feeling more uncomfortable in certain situations. So all of that to say, there was information that I learned about that sort of really sped up our transition. It sped up my transition. It gave me permission to listen to myself in a way that I hadn't been able to before, because I was in a paradigm of there's one right way, and this is the way it needs to be. And yet my soul was saying,
yeah, because the fear is, if there is only one right way, I might miss that one way, and then everyone else is going to miss that one way. And that's so divisive and separate. That's our deepest fear, is that separateness.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. I've always wanted to do the right thing. And so without being able to have the information that I learned, for me to step out of a belief and a programming in integrity for me, which was through information, through a lot of study and research over months and months of just agonizing, painful discoveries. It's what really led me into feeling like it all made sense and it was all adding up. And so now I can look back and I can say my soul was sort of trying to beg me to listen, but I couldn't listen because I was stuck in this space of what I would consider to be programming, because it's all I ever knew. And so, yeah, stepping out of that has just been such a gift. You mentioned our excommunication. So something that happened on this journey is that when we started discovering things that were really upsetting and felt we were in a place of feeling very much betrayed and really, really just so sad. And as we learn more and more about transitionings happening, not only out of our faith, but out of, so many different types of faith right now, we realized that there were people that were probably hurting and that probably felt really, really alone. And we had the opportunity to go to a conference in Texas. It was called a Mormon Stories Retreat. And we got to be with other people who were going through this. And we felt that we weren't alone. And it was so helpful to just be embraced and loved and understood. So when we came back to Ohio, we felt that surely we could offer that space for others. And statistically, we knew that there were people. We just knew that there were people who were suffering and who were feeling alone and who didn't know that others were going through what they were going through. So we decided to create a support community just with the desire to not feel alone ourselves and to help other people not feel alone as they were facing something that it's so interesting. I think that oftentimes when we go through something really painful, like let's say someone's diagnosed with cancer or our child gets into a horrible car accident and we feel like we don't know what way is up and we're so sad. In those times, I hope that we would have our communities and our families that would embrace us and that would say, I'm here. Tell me what's going on. How can I help you? How can I love you? In this experience, it's really hard because we were going through something that felt like one of the most devastating crises of our entire lives. And yet, if we shared that, and when we shared that, instead of we're here, we love you, I'm so sorry this is happening, tell me about it. It was, you're lost, you're deceived, you're confused, don't share, don't talk, turn away. So it's really an interesting experience to go through something so painful when you would really benefit from having people embrace you and love you and hear you. And what ends up happening for a lot of people in this situation is the exact opposite. And so not only do you feel this betrayal that is undescribable, but you also often end up feeling betrayed by the people who you would have considered to be your closest allies and friends and family and faith community. So it's really a feeling of being so alone.
Yeah, it's like when people only see you as part of a system as opposed to a sovereign soul. Mm-hmm. Let me back up. When they only see themselves that way, then you will trigger that in them and they will make it about you when actually there's a bravery attached. And brave is one of my favorite words. I mean, Brené Brown uses it a lot and I keep hearing it from different thought leaders. When the biggest acts of bravery come from someone reclaiming their soul sovereignty in whatever way that looks like for them and whatever life station they're in. And it is a trigger for others, as sometimes, especially those closest to us who know us only in that construct, who can only look at us in that construct, right? So I just wanted to say that. And because I know that's been a pain point, even hearing you talk about the agonizing, the months and months of agonizing and painful discoveries. I remember that's probably what hit Jeff and I the most as we listened to your interview with your husband and your daughter, especially. Oh, that just tore me up. Is how, like, I remember you saying that you guys were just sobbing in your bedroom for hours, days, weeks, months. And just that visual of someone coming in to that sacred space and judging that, like, it puts a different light on the process for me. Is we can never look at someone's transition or choice and assume we know the depth around that decision they made. And that's the sacred part of it. So I just want to put that in there, because that is what touched me about your story so much.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, it actually makes me emotional just kind of going back to that and being in that and thinking about others who are in that. And just to rewind for a second, what you said made me think about one of the realizations I had through this, which was realizing that other people's behavior is really an indicator of how they feel about themselves. And so a part of that process was really honing in on the unspoken that's happening in this transition. And that's provided a lot of growth, which we'll get to in a minute. But that agony and that loneliness and that knowing that as we stepped out and as we chose to be vulnerable, it would bring upon us more judgment. It's just really hard to explain unless you go through it. But we knew we could do something to alleviate suffering. And I think that when we're in a place of great suffering, a natural human desire is to want to put that to good use. So that was our desire. Like, how can we put this suffering and this growth and this beautiful, painful journey into something good for others? So we decided to start this support group, which has now grown to having, I think we have like 140 members that are in just the central Ohio. We're a very limited group, so we have certain boundaries. Whereas a lot of support groups are kind of like anyone can join them. We're just a Central Ohio support group. And that's really what segued into going from we've stepped away to, I think, a space of fear for our local leaders of feeling threatened by the support that we were offering. So we had a few meetings and we really tried our best to say, we're just doing really what we've been taught in Mormonism. And I'm so thankful for those teachings of what would Jesus do? And, loving the lost sheep. And I really felt like more than any other time in our entire lives, we were actually doing what we were taught to do. Like, we were doing it. It wasn't just bringing a casserole to someone who had a baby. It wasn't just doing our home teaching or visiting teaching. Like, for the first time, we felt like we were actually alleviating suffering, showing up as a real friend in people's life, people who were in crisis, people who had been just marginalized, people who had been labeled, people who were feeling so betrayed. We were able to step into mourning with those who mourn, and comforting those who stood in need of comfort, which we committed to do that. And we would share that with our leaders. Like, we're doing what we we committed to this. We made covenants, and they are sacred. I believe those covenants are sacred. I believe the most sacred covenants that we can make as human beings in any church, in any culture, is to recognize that we are all made up of the same stuff. You know, the terrorists. We are one. We're one. We've been programmed differently based on cultures, based on religions, based on, I think, so many layers of soul complexity that we can hardly articulate.
Mm-hmm.
And the most, I think, valuable thing that we can, I guess I'll say for me, one of the most valuable awakenings is to realize that it's not about right and wrong. It's really not.
Mm-hmm.
Because the conversation in humanity has got to extend so far beyond a myoscopic, binary, linear, black and white, us versus them,
right,
wrong, one way kind of a thing. And I'm encouraged that that's happening. But we felt like we were really stepping into that, informing this support group. And we found so much joy in committing ourselves to loving others in non-judgment and full, open, welcoming acceptance. And it was really so interesting to feel like there was a misunderstanding around that. And I just genuinely believe that that's rooted in fear. So we had invited all of our local leaders, not just our stake president and bishop, but stake presidents and bishops and bishoprics throughout the Central Ohio region. We created as a group a formal invitation to invite them to come see the pastoral care that we were offering, the community that we were offering. We said, we'd love for you to be a part of this because they're suffering. And we know that you, as good, loving men, you want to help alleviate that. Like, that was our hope. Right. That was my genuine belief. Just because we share humanity, and you're human and I'm human, and we have love to give. And it, like, step out of worry around truth claims, step out of worry around, are they answering the temple questions the right way? Can we just recognize that we're one, you know? And
just that
so
basic
I would continue.
soul, the basic elements of the soul, the basic humanity, yeah, I think that your intention in your heart was so pure, still is, of course. But at that time, trying to reconcile, as you say, the existing paradigm structures of duality, right? Like, it's either this way or no way.
Mm-hmm.
You either have to do it this way or it's not right. Mm-hmm. And
mm-hmm.
in soul work, in the soul realm, that doesn't fly. There's neutrality in the soul room as far as the worth of souls, and sometimes structures, religions, they grapple with there not being a hierarchy in spirit. And so the fear comes from, we've got to give labels to stuff. We've got to marginalize. We've got to separate. We've got to create power structures, because unless we do, everyone's going to be lost. And we can't have that. We can't trust the average person to just know their truth. So I just want to reflect that back to you, because it's incredibly wise to, once somebody embodies a truth in their soul and it upwells in their soul and they understand it, the natural next step is to do exactly what you guys did, which is, how can, oh my gosh, we just went through hell. How can we lift hell off the earth in this domain by doing something to alleviate that suffering in another? So that was your heart, right? That was your pure, undefiled intention.
It really was. It really was. And so we would sit in hours of these, and I welcomed them. Like, I really believed. And people have called me, you're so naive. But I just really believed, as we sat and we talked about, in Mormonism, we worship Jesus Christ and his example, and this picture hangs on this wall. And I would sit there in tears and I would say, we're really trying. Like, we're really trying to do that, right? That's exactly why we formed this group. So, and I don't believe that those men are bad men. I don't believe that they're unloving men. I think they're good men. I think they're just at a different place. And I was at a different place. And so I just want to insert that. It's not really, for me, the journey hasn't been looking at judgment. Just doesn't do a whole lot of good. So I would just like to say that they're at a different place and they're trying with the tools that they have, but those tools weren't working in the situation. And it was hard to have none of the leaders at all accept our invitation. There was one who said he might attend, but out of like the 10 high level church leaders, that we invited, none were willing. And we said, we'll do it in a space that works for you. Like, we really genuinely wanted them to join with us, to show up, because there had been a lot of people who had been really hurt and misunderstood in an office with one of these leaders, which is there's a power differential that's a challenge, and our stake president had said, the place for people to gain this support is across from me in here in the church building at my desk. And we would try and share like that just really is not working. Mm-hmm. And it's not worked for many of these people. So basically those conversations led us into the church discipline. So they had basically said, you need to disband the support group. And we said, we will not disband the support group. And during this process was when I was growing into the realization that my worth was really not dependent upon external validation. I was moving into really trusting myself. I really, really believed in what we were doing. And it just didn't matter to me at that point what others thought about me. I knew that the relationships that I would maintain through it would help me to grow into my highest self. And I knew that I would lose a lot of relationships. But the reason why we decided to record it and publish it was just really in the hope that genuinely we could help this organization move into a healthier space, that if we are threatened or sitting in fear from the mass transition that is taking place, are we helping either side? Like, I don't think we're helping either side. We need to transcend the you're not a part of our tribe anymore because you don't believe the way that we believe exactly. And so that was our heart in making it public. And we did record it, and all that's available through the podcast. So yeah, we were excommunicated primarily for, initially in the meetings, it was just about the support group. Then when we were brought into the court, they kind of added some additional charges that we hadn't really heard of before. And that's all available if people want to hear that. But yeah, so that was kind of our story, our transition, surface level of our transition story out of the church.
And the fact that it did really trigger a lot of people who could see in their perception distortion, right? Because like you said, we don't want to judge either way. They were operating from their construct and the way that they have been programmed, or if you want to say it that way, or maybe there was a threat to what they perceive to be the spiritual answer, right? So judgment, we're all on this path, like working with what we have. I think the power in your story is that there was an awakening that happened in the middle of or that facilitated the excommunication, because you were already awakened to, hey, my body wisdom, my soul voice, what is best for my marriage, my family, you already had the knowing. So for someone to come, an exterior authority or leader, if you will, that comes and says to you, but no, that's not right. Like, you're not right. That's not right. When you felt heart-led and connected to, and had the conviction of it already, that is power. That is authentic power. Authentic power is honoring and braving the voice of your soul and acting on it. So that is why it does trigger other people. It triggers in both ways. It triggers the people in good ways that are like, oh my gosh, that was so brave and amazing. Bless her heart. Their family, oh, what they must be going through. Such depth of compassion, such admiration. There's that camp that you triggered. And then there's the camp of, oh my gosh, they're going to hell and they don't see it. And I'm so sorry for them, and I can't associate with them, and they're so deceived, and they're in Satan's grasp. And so there's a very different energy in those camps. And as you noted, it's the individual, not the collective. It's the individuals that get triggered because they haven't come to terms with how Christ-like they actually are. They don't know how to connect to someone who steps out of the norm, when in fact, Christ did that all day long. That's what he did. He was a revolutionary. So I love that you brought him up because, I see Mary Magdalene the same way as I dive more into her life, and everyone knows I'm a Mary Magdalene enthusiast. It's been a real different, I guess you could say, it just drenches my soul to see their powerful partnership as male and female. And that's why seeing you and your husband grapple with what you have and suffer with what you have, like true spiritual partnership, whether it's in a marriage dynamic or with friends or a community, a true spiritual partnership is expansive. It's, it would trigger the stepping into their shoes in that camp more than it would marginalizing and judging. So that's just such a vulnerable thing, though, isn't it? Or, speaking of relationships, I know you and I talked before about the importance of establishing boundaries, which is what you had to do in the space that you were in, because you stood at your ground and you said, I will not disband this group. This is helping. This is alleviating suffering. I know that this is ministering. So you engaged in that power dynamic with that leader and said, no, I will not, or that group of leaders, and said, no, I will not. And that took a lot of guts. So how do you, because it's what you teach now and it's where you're at, like that importance of coming from a place of empowerment to establish your boundaries and how vulnerability works in that.
I have a powerful kind of visual story I'd like to share as we kind of talk about boundaries and relationships. And for me, really moving into more awareness around who I offer vulnerability to and who I don't, and how that's been empowering. I feel that a part of my awakening, a part of my process, was stepping into a business where there was a lot of recognition socially, outwardly. And I moved into being able to grow successfully in this business to the point where I became a car achiever. And I have this picture.
You won a car. You actually earned enough in your prowess as a businesswoman. Just own it. That's super cool. You won a car. You earned a car.
Yeah. So I earned a car 13 months into my business, which was a really crazy, beautiful journey that I now reflect on so differently now that I've gone through this, because I actually believe it was a part of my awakening on so many levels. I believe I was drawn to this business for a very specific reason and a very specific purpose. And that kind of goes into my believing that, as I see it now, things just happen for a reason. For me, it's undeniable in my life as I see it. And for me, my business was a part of my awakening. So I I had this Lexus Achievement Celebration event, and it was lovely, and people said very kind and generous things, and we had a professional photographer, and there's this picture of me in the vehicle with all these people around. I have a predominantly LDS team, and shortly thereafter, my transition out of my faith, out of my religion began. And I spent so many times all alone in that same car, in that driver's seat, just weeping and just questioning if I had the strength and the power to be misunderstood, if I had the ability to do something where I know I would be persecuted in ways, and if I could realize that my higher self was saying, was recognizing that I was offered an experience to refine my ability to trust myself, to believe in my core values. I just sat so many times alone in that car, in the driver's seat of that car, wondering, do I have the strength to be, to go from someone who's seen as trustworthy and as a good leader and as kind and all of these things, which I very much hope that I feel that I still am. I do, even more so. But I knew that my reputation would change significantly if I decided to go public. And if I decided to stick with my core values, if I decided to say, no, we won't disband the group. If I decided to say, we're going to share our story on this interview on the Mormon Stories podcast, because I know it can help others. And so I now look back at that picture, that beautiful picture, and I'm wearing this white dress, and I have all these people around me who are really that day at least singing my praises. And the journey I've gone through is one where I had to be all alone. That's where my growth has been through this, is even completely alone with myself, with my soul, even aside from Cody, because Cody wasn't on the same journey the whole time. And I would sit in that car and I would just say, this is the moment of greatness. This is the real moment where no one is here cheering me on. And in fact, everyone might walk away. They might walk away. And that has happened. And they might say things about me that are untrue, and they might believe things that about me that are untrue. And I decided that it didn't matter what anyone else thought of me, that it didn't matter if 10,000 people pointed their fingers at me and said, you're lost, you're fallen, because what I realized all alone in my journey through months of being alone, and often being alone in my car, was I believed in what I was doing and how I was growing. And I believed in it so strongly, and I felt it so much within me that I could withstand whatever came, that it didn't matter, because I was aligning my awareness with my soul. And that has helped me to move forward, to face, to both welcome this amazing community of people you and others who've shown up and just embraced us in so much love and seeing us, but also to fall from grace, I
just want to validate and honor what you're talking about, because what a beautiful gift from the universe for you to be sitting in a car and getting all these accolades from the world. I'm in a similar business, but that's very recognition based, and we don't earn cars, but there are lots of bonuses. There are lots of ways to stand out. There are lots of ways to be visible, and it's very it's very satisfying and it's very alluring.
Mm-hmm.
And it's very easy to fall out of alignment, even though the business in and of itself is full of integrity. But the individual could fall out of alignment if that was their quest, is to just receive that recognition and make that their life journey, honestly, and pursuit. So what an amazing setup for what you were about to endure, and seeing that, kind of like juxtapositioning around, like, oh my gosh, like I could lose this. And am I willing to do that? And I'm telling you, that is an initiation. That when somebody lets go of the world and what the world thinks about their path and their emphasis and heart and intention, when people let that go, it's almost like a rite of passage into your true evolution, because that is what Christ did. I'm bringing it back to him and Mary Magdalene. I always put them together now. That there was just this like, I know in my knowing, it's like where your treasure is, that's where your heart is, that's where your treasure is. And you can lose the whole, what does a man gain if he loses the whole world or loses his soul and gains the whole world, or whatever that scripture is. It's so true. The rite of passage into the unknown of, I could lose this. And not only could I lose this, I could lose relationships that I love. And I could risk being misunderstood. And that is a deep-seated fear in the psyche, in the collective consciousness of all of us, is being separate because no one understands us. And you nailed it into the, for me, like, no one is going to be there cheering me on. There's a book that I've really loved as I've grappled with my own transitions of different natures, from relationships and religion and family dynamics. And I mean, you name it. There's so many things that we want to do away with illusion. That's what our soul is actually seeking, is to do away with illusion. But there is a book called Unattended Sorrow that has been a grounding force for me, is because that's our fear, is that we're going to be all alone. No one's going to understand us. We're going to be so sad. No one's going to be able to stand in support of that. I think what you and I have learned, and especially because you and I are fans of the books, The Seed of the Soul, is that we aren't ever alone. There are guides on the other side. There are teachers, unseen influences that are standing for us in our aloneness, ready for us to be alone with them and our soul, so that we can be led to our highest expression.
I really feel that. I really felt that profoundly. And I feel like for me, it was a sacred initiation into stepping into less fear, into feeling freed, into recognizing that as we reframe what happens to us, they left me into they freed me. These types of like stepping out of the sort of like sitting above our experience and looking down and trying to be mindful about what's actually happening and step out of the myth that we might be creating based on assumptions. Learning to not take things personally, because the way others react and respond to us really just has so much to do with where they're at and their soul signature, their space, their journey, which is at a different point than yours, than mine, than anyone else's besides their own. And that's really helped me. Something else then that I had to work on was, as relationships fell away and fell away and fell away, and as I was told that I was blocked out of lives, or blocked out of downlines, or blocked out of, or I've been told we've tried to get out from under you. I've had someone tell me that, we've called corporate and, we don't want to be connected to you anymore. And what I recognized within me was that if I can see the truth, which is that this isn't about me per se, there's a bigger conversation going on, then I was able to release those relationships lovingly. Like, not that I've done that every time. I mean, I've really grieved. I'm not some superhuman. I'm just not. That's not the perception I want to give off. It's not. But so I've grieved and I've wept, and it's hard. It's really hard. And it's painful. But it's been helpful to realize that the truth is, if I know that I've shown up in love the best I know how, even though I might be different from you now, but I can honor your path and that your journey is different from me. As long as I can answer those questions, have I been as loving as I can? Have I been accepting? Then I can free the relationships. And the freeing of relationships that are no longer serving me has made space for me to energetically move into a different space and call and draw other relationships that I would have never had if I stayed in a place of sorrow or clinging on or begging or hustling for worthiness, in a place that I just no longer belong. And so,
yeah, that phrase,
I've been
hustling
ushered
for worthiness.
into.
Yeah, sorry to interrupt. I just think that phrase, hustling for worthiness, is a big cultural theme among many faith paths, traditions, churches, religions. It's, you can only hope to attain to be good enough. And our souls don't like that. It doesn't resonate. That whole sense of, guess what? What if we operated from the overarching truth and paradigm that we already are whole? I have this podcast, Women Seeking Wholeness. What we're not seeking our wholeness. It's already there. We're seeking to remember it, to access it, to live from it. And I think if structures, especially religions, communicated that to youth, children, and adults, we would have absolute mass. Everyone would love to go to church. Everyone would just be like counting down the days to be validated that way. I don't know very many people that they go to church out of a sense of duty. I'm just going to be honest. Most of them go out of a sense of duty, not the spirit of honor and love as you're talking, or to be guided into their remembering of wholeness. It's, I better show up to see what I'm doing wrong so I can fix it, so I feel better, because I feel like crap. This is not the plan of happiness for me. Therefore, it must be me. It can't be the system. There must be something broken in me. And that isn't what Christ taught. He said, "Ye are gods. The kingdom of heaven is within you. You're a temple, you're a city set on a hill, you're a candle. Why would you put that on a bushel?" Like, he constantly was affirming that wholeness, not that he had any tolerance for hypocrisy, but he was totally against power structures. He was totally against, he could have gone to anyone to get baptized, and he went to John the Baptist out in a river who was eating wild locusts and honey, right? So I'm just saying, it's all perception. What I'm hearing you say is, you awoke to, especially when you started losing friends, it's like, that's part of the illusion, is when you listen to your soul voice, you find your real people. You find your tribe. They find you. Actually, you and I talked before this interview about my last podcast, which was the art of feminine magnetism. You automatically draw to you people and circumstances that are for your highest good, to do away with illusion, and then to embrace your true people who get you, people who are in the tribe, who are holding form for your expansion and your beauty. So you feel like you're losing all this stuff. That's why we grieve, right? I'm losing this, I'm losing that. But you're receiving something much greater. It's hard to see in the moment, right?
Yes. And, it's so interesting what you just shared. I was thinking when you were sharing, I had the word I wrote a couple notes down. I had the word hustle here, and then I said equals. It's a word that no longer serves me in how I want to live. Hustling for worthiness just simply isn't in alignment with our souls, with our higher selves. It's not compatible,
right?
Because it's not, in the way I see it, it's just not truth. And, Neil Donald Walsh has written these books, Conversations with God, that, I went through 6 months, 8 to 10 hours a day, sort of deconstructing my faith and like really heavily rooted in the podcasts and the books that were deconstructing that. And then I moved into the next phase, which has led me on all sorts of journeys, which has been so soul nourishing. But one of the people who has really spoken to me is Neil Donald Walsh, who's written Conversations with God, and he shares what you shared, which I think is truth, which is that the work is to reconnect and to rediscover that we were all born with radiating full whole light. And I want to learn how to tap into that more, because I think that we're wise beyond our comprehension. We just haven't always been given the tools or the awareness to know exactly how to access that. And also how to access joy. And part of that is letting the illusion go, letting the myth go, which, what's that book I just read? The Four Agreements. Toltec Wisdom, Don Miguel Ruiz, who also wrote The Five Levels of Attachment. He's speaking that language. And the other thing that was coming up for me as you were talking was, if I would have listened to what you just shared 2 years ago, I honestly don't know if it would have computed for me. It's like through this journey, I'm developing a vocabulary that isn't necessarily the spoken word, but that's part of it, but it's something that's happening inside of me. So I can listen to what you're sharing, and it's so meaningful. And I can attach a bunch of experiences and feelings to what you're saying, but I wouldn't have had the vocabulary or the experiences or the tools personally to really have what you've just shared resonate with me. It would have been sort of out there, sort of woo-woo, sort of like, what is she talking about?
What has she been smoking?
Yeah, like what the wholeness and the what and the like. It just, for me, the journey out of my religion has given me a whole new set of tools to navigate relationships, to navigate parenting, to navigate my soul journey, to navigate what real spirituality is for me. Out of this very structured, for me, what felt like a very structured, myoscopic, one path, this is the right way, repeat what we've told you, endure forever till the end. There was like a lid on that. And my soul knew that. There was an end point for me. And I grew. I'm thankful. Like, I'm really thankful for how I grew in that space. It helped me.
You can look back on it and go, wow, that was needful. Not only am I grateful for it, I needed that.
I feel like I did. And so I feel like there's purpose that I came into that paradigm for my soul journey. Mm-hmm. There was a purpose for that. And then that purpose served its greater good. And then I moved into a different space, which is now serving my growth in a new, and for me, a much healthier and joyful way.
Yeah, I want to talk about that. But first, because I have seen your beautiful daughter and heard her articulate, and she's well advanced for her age as a soul. It's obvious. Brynlee. And I know she's inspired a lot of people with her bravery and speaking out about the transition with your family and how it has impacted her, and where she's been able to grow into this tolerant and wise and discerning young lady. So tell our listeners, if you would, how, with your awakening with parenting, because I know you talked about the empty vessel thing. So let's develop that a little bit, how you awoke to that discrepancy between, it kind of feeds into what we're saying about the wholeness part, right? That we're so broken and we're all these, we can't be trusted. We need all these leaders to tell us what to do and whatever. How did that translate into your parenting?
Yeah, so that's another gift. I mean, there's been so many gifts, and that the way that my parenting has sort of awakened and evolved has been one of those gifts. I think for me, previously in my paradigm, I felt that my children came to me as these empty vessels, and I just hoped that I was properly filling them. And I feared a lot that, maybe I wasn't, and was I doing it the right way? And was I measuring up to these standards? And did it look like it was the right recipe to be a successful mother, to successfully teach them so that they would successfully stay on this one path that is a prescribed path for the only way to happiness. And I've moved from that into really genuinely believing, and I've really had some profound experiences around this, which I think I'm not going to share here, but what I really believe is that as human beings, my children included, we come into this world with complex, unique, wise souls. And whether we frame that in, we carry our ancestry, we carry the past growth and aches and pains and evolution of generations and generations within us, they make us up, or whether you want to frame that in, our souls are journeying through many lived experiences. It doesn't really matter. But what really matters to me is that I've recognized that my children are enough. They were born enough, and they were born whole. And that I am a partner. I've partnered with them. And I believe that partnership is really sacred and spiritual and extends beyond what we can maybe know right now. But I've partnered with them to guide them into them discovering themselves and pulling inward to express themselves outwardly, into recognizing that I don't need to fill them with the right prescription. There isn't a right recipe to fill them, to make them the right way, to make them feel happy.
Yeah.
Right.
You could have, I know you have 4 daughters, right?
Mm-hmm.
So imagine giving the same prescription to each daughter and saying, there you go. This is your life. This is what you need to think, feel, do, and be. And that's that homogenizing is soul killing. And structures do it all the time. But anyway, go ahead.
Yeah. And I did it. I did it.
Yeah,
I did it. And I tried to do it. And I tried to do it really well. And being in that paradigm actually extended so far beyond the religion, right? So it was much more, my parenting was much more binary, right, wrong, black, white, good, bad. You did something bad. Let's make a better choice. And now it's moved to just, the feeling is more of, well, you could make that choice, or you could make that choice. And let's just talk about how would that teach you? Or how would that feel for you? Or if you were to respond in that way, what do you think? Would that be hurtful for you? Like, would that help you to move forward? Would that help you to progress? Would that maybe, let's talk through that. But the fear around, oh my gosh, they might make a misstep is really gone for me, because they will make missteps. And those missteps will teach them in really profound and powerful ways that they couldn't learn without the missteps. And while I believed that before my transition, it's like in my mind, I knew certain things, but I had to experience them to really understand them in a new way. And I had to step out of a very linear mindset. For example, Brinley went to homecoming with this incredible group. She went with a gay friend who's just an amazing human being. And there were other people in that group who did not fit what I would have previously considered to be the people I want my daughter to be engaged with, right? Mm-hmm. And she came home from that date. It wasn't a date. It was a group friendship experience. And she kind of went specifically to support this one gay male friend.
Right.
And, she came home and she just shared emotionally, like, people need to hear the stories of these. They're so wise and they're so compassionate. They've been through so much. And to be able to get my kids. So I often think about what would it mean for me to have, quote unquote, succeeded as a mother. Although I don't even like that term because
right, that's so arbitrary, we could spend a whole
podcast
subjective.
Talking about
yeah.
What does that mean, right? Like, so, but for me, what would help me feel like I've done well, and what this awakening has helped me really step into, is teaching my children. If I could have my child sit across from someone who is so different from them, who's been programmed different, who looks different, maybe who has a different sexual orientation, doesn't matter, who's completely different from them. If I could have my child look at that person and recognize how worthy they are, and even be brought to emotion with love and compassion because they see themselves in that other person. Mm-hmm. Like, if I can help usher enliven that awareness into my children, that will, for me, help me feel in part that I've done something good for them. And the transition has helped me in that effort, because I just stepped out of judgment.
Right.
And before I would say I'm not.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead. I'm super passionate about this. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to end with, but I would have said before, I was raised by a mom who's very out there and who's very, I would say, very non-judgmental, and who exposed us to different, it wasn't the typical LDS upbringing, because we were exposed to different people, and we traveled, and we went to different churches, and we were going to the Black Baptist church in Provo, Utah, and the Hare Krishna, so that we could, so while I would have probably said before, I really strive to not be a judgmental person. For me and for Cody, our experience of recognizing, of stepping out of our religion, it just fell. I can't even explain it. It's like we didn't try. It wasn't like I'm really trying to not judge. It wasn't like I'm really going to do these things so I can really hustle to try and not judge, right? It was more like, it's gone. It's gone.
Right.
It fell.
It fell because you disintegrated the illusion around we're all separate. It's what we were talking about before. The true awakening for you is the lost sheep, that we are in oneness. I have hanging in my house, right when you walk in the door, this huge painting, and I can't remember the artist, but it's a painting of Joseph and Mary taking Jesus to pick out his first lamb, basically, and there's the shepherd there, kind of looking on, and so are Joseph and Mary, and Jesus has the one black sheep, the young Jesus. He's like, and then I think the name of the painting is "I want that one" or something, or "I want this one." And it's like the shepherd's kind of surprised. Like, don't you want the most undefiled, healthy, pure, for all outward intents and purposes, the most successful, the most unblemished? But Jesus chooses that one. Of course, that's just allegorical, right? Because we don't know if that actually happened, but it's totally how he lived. So I love that your daughter, that you gave her this, and we're taught to fear things that are outwardly different, or that the fear comes from because of this person's lifestyle, because of this person's orientation, or set of circumstances, or whatever, or even their choices. Potentially, I'm going to be separate from them because I'm going to be over here because I know the truth and I have the way and they don't. And that's also very soul killing, that judgment.
It's very divisive in a way that I really couldn't see or experience or put language to the way that I can now, having stepped out of it. But when you're taught that you have the one way and this is the one way and it's the right way, right? Then it's impossible, I think, for most of us. I'll say for me. It was impossible for me and for Cody to then look upon someone else who didn't have the one way without any, hopefully it wasn't a whole lot, but it was there that, oh, if you only knew, oh, if you were only on this path, right? That it's however big or little that is, when we feel that we're in a place of absolute truth and we have been given the one way, and we've been taught that these other people maybe aren't following that one way, it's almost impossible for someone who's really rooted in that belief. Like I give a lot of grace to my future self and to people who might be there still. It's very, very hard to be in non-judgment, in complete non-judgment when you're stuck in that paradigm. It was for me.
So as a parent, it's almost like I keep thinking, and this came up in my retreat over the weekend, where we were discussing unearthing the masterpiece that is you. In other words, letting your soul express itself. It's kind of like when, I think it's Michelangelo had said that, or maybe it was Da Vinci. Anyway, one of them had to be Michelangelo about the sculpture, that he only chisels away kind of like what's already there underneath. Like he's not really the artist. He's just chiseling away pieces of the stone so that what's already there can be revealed. I don't remember exactly how the quote goes, but the idea is that the highest way to facilitate change and inspire and motivate is not through control or fear or this is the only way and we all have to, and you have to do this because this is what we do in our house and this is what we do in our religion and this is what we do at school. And the best teachers and guides are those who hold forum and hold space for your own unique soul expression. And with parenting, it's a challenge because you have your own family culture. And if it's very religious, there are some challenges. If it's a strictly rigid religious family culture that's adhering to a set of, there's some beautiful moral and ethical guiding principles that religions embody and promote. But when you put it into individual family structures, what if you do have a gay child? What if you do have a child who says, you know what, I'm not really resonating with this set of beliefs? That's when the fear comes in, and that's when the alienation and marginalization happens, is in that distancing between your in essence, your soul family. But what I see is it's I've seen alienation, and then I've seen that actually can awaken parents when they have a child that isn't going the way and they really tune in and listen and ask. That can shift the parent into a more tolerant, non-judgmental, love-focused relationship. As opposed to, oh my gosh, I'm so afraid for your salvation. I'm so afraid. I don't want you to be away. Like, you know what I mean? I know you know what I mean. I don't even have to ask if you know what I mean.
Yeah, I do. And, you know, I think the thing that makes me both thankful and sad is I feel very thankful that I recognize now that I feel in a way saved from what can happen, which is, it just cuts off vulnerability, right? So if a child is experiencing, maybe I don't want to be an at-home mother, maybe I don't want to get married, maybe whatever it is that might not follow the prescription, the path. And if they feel that you're committed to that path, what happens is that they will not share. They will not feel safe. They will not feel that we're able to show up for them in what they're experiencing without judgment. So they won't share. And there have even been things with Brinley where she's the oldest, where she said, these are things I didn't share with you that I now do share with you. And I'm so thankful for this increased transparency and vulnerability. And, here we thought, oh, we're doing it right. We're following the plan. And what I realize now is I'm so thankful that I've ushered in the opportunity for my kids, I hope, to feel like they can share anything with me. And on the flip side of that, I've seen, even in relationships with some family members, which I won't get too specific into, I've seen Cody experience the exact opposite, and it's this shutting down. It's this, I can't hear you. We have family members, close family members who refuse to watch the podcast, who refuse to hear anything about our journey. And they refuse, which again.
And that's the highest form of ignorance. I mean, not to diminish the love you have for those family members or whatever, but it's this is what I know. And there's a quote by Wayne Dyer that maybe I'll put into the show notes about, I'll find it while you're talking, but essentially, yeah, it's like, I would rather be asleep to the context of why you're choosing this, because I'm so right. And I'm so afraid that, that's like the ultimate form of ignorance, is not wanting to know the back end story or the context.
Yeah. Yeah. I think also, Cody shared on Facebook, I think he's moving through some of this pain and of some of these relationships. Something he had shared was this quote by Doug Sherrod. It says, if you aren't open to being wrong, you aren't committed to knowing the truth. Mm-hmm. And that was really a transformative thing for Cody, because he recognized in his search, he was approaching it as, I already have the end in mind. I know the end. I've given my life to the end. There is one way, and I know that that's the one way. When he changed his search, he changed his discovery process into, I have to be open to the fact that this discovery, this learning, this research I'm doing might not lead me to my preconceived set of beliefs where I was before. That's when everything shifted for him. So it is scary. It is vulnerable. But ultimately, the point being, people can choose to not listen to their loved ones. They can choose to feel that they are in the right, which again, as we talked about, doesn't serve. Doesn't serve the greater good, right or wrong. I wouldn't look at someone and say, I'm right and you're wrong, because it's just so much more complex than that. But ultimately, relationships, vulnerability and safety and non-judgment is like oxygen in relationships. And once the oxygen is cut off, the relationship dies, or the relationship as you knew it dies.
Right.
And I'm thankful to have that lifeline, what I feel like is oxygen, being increased amounts of oxygen, helping me to supply the life of my engagement with my children, my growth, my helping them on their path.
I found that quote by Wayne Dyer. The ultimate ignorance is the rejection of something you know nothing about, yet refuse to investigate. I'm going to say it again because it's just so deep. The ultimate ignorance is the rejection of something you know nothing about, yet refuse to investigate. I think in their defense of people who refuse to investigate, they truly do believe that that is the right thing. That if they were to investigate that thing they don't know about, it would lead to their demise in some way. And so their intention is, I cannot afford to go off the beaten path because I might get lost. And I'm truly afraid for this family member or this loved one of mine. And if I start to investigate, I might go off the path. Or just a general, like, don't challenge my paradigm because I'm really comfortable here. It's easier for me to judge than do the work to try to investigate because I want to be right. So there's a lot of things with the ego happening that they're not even consciously aware of yet. But the beauty of how the universe brings us these lessons is they will continue to be brought circumstances, people that challenge that until they are confronted with actually having no choice almost, but to investigate. And it'll keep showing up, maybe not in this lifetime. But at least your bravery, you and Cody and Brinley and your family, that bravery literally shifts generational mindsets. And so while the evidence may not be in support of, oh, these people, like, they are rejecting me, on some core soul level, they have the knowing that you're stepping out and that it's brave and that there is something there. Because you haven't, like, you've only expanded since then, right? You've only become more tolerant, more loving, the fruits of the spirit, if you will, right? You've only magnified those. They haven't diminished. Your light level has only expanded. And that will baffle some people. Like, what? That Satan, he sure does know how to mimic light, or something to that effect. So,
right. Yeah.
Okay. So I love this whole reframing, and we can kind of culminate our discussion. I think the depth that you bring into this discussion about wholeness is that it really can't be taken away from us, no matter what we choose, no matter what we step away from, no matter what we transition through, relationships, structures, programs, family cultures. So even the bad is a gift, right? I mean, you have shared that with me. And I love that courage, bravery comes from doing what's not comfortable and often being alone in it. But the willingness to move through it and leaning into it instead of the avoidance. So can you share with us sort of your testimony of what that has done for you and for your family?
Oh, let me think about how to encapsulate this. I think that there will be people, hopefully men and women, because I really feel like your podcast is for human beings.
Yeah, it's not just for women. I have men listeners and they've told me.
That's wonderful. I think that's wonderful. So I believe that there will be men and women who are listening to this who may be in a similar transition. Maybe it's not a religious transition. Maybe it's a relationship transition. Maybe it's a business transition. I don't know. In different transitions. And I speak to a lot of these people. I get to talk to them and I get to hear their stories. And if I had to kind of offer my testimony, it would be wrapped up with the thing I hear most is this fear of what will they think of me, but also more even than that, how will I show up in these relationships that might become really, really painful? Or how will I handle what might just fall away from me? Can I handle it? And what I would share, what my experience has been, is that as I've moved through truly recognizing that my worth, that my truth is not dependent upon what others think of me. I've recognized that. I've also recognized that people's behavior is an indicator of how they feel about themselves. So I've realized that not taking it personal is huge. And then the third thing I've really realized is that we won't die if we are willing to be misunderstood, like being misunderstood, labeled, marginalized, whatever, it actually doesn't kill us. It actually, I think, is an initiation into our higher being, like to go through an experience where you will actually be misunderstood no matter what you say or do, or how good you are, or how awakened you are, whatever. It doesn't really matter because it's not about you. You probably will be misunderstood. But like being able to recognize that is out of my hands, truly it is. I can't, it's an illusion that I could make people think something about me anyway. So as we're able to recognize these truths, as I've been able to recognize these truths and see the false in what I previously believed, which is that I could control how people thought of me, it has freed me into being able to do two things, both align myself with myself, which is, like you said so beautifully, it's something that cannot be taken from you. It cannot be taken from you. And this is going to sound really dramatic, and we're definitely not in this space anymore. But just to illustrate what you said, there was a point that was really scary for me in my marriage. We weren't talking about divorce at all, but I knew Cody was very much an Orthodox believer. And I had gone through sort of this transition, and I knew that I was just not in that space. And I didn't know. I just really didn't know. I knew I had to be true to myself, but I didn't know if that would mean that my marriage would survive. I didn't know. And the gift is that even in that unknowing of one of the most important relationships, the most important relationship that I have outside of myself is this person. And my truth might damage that. But I felt calm because I knew that that as I was aligned with myself and doing the best I could, that it would all work out. Whatever structures fell, whatever structures changed, whatever relationships changed, there was a peace and a knowing that hasn't left me. And it's hard to describe, but it's something I didn't feel before in my life and that I feel now. And that's what you said, it'll never leave you. So wrapping that back into, I'm scared of what others will think if I go through this transition, if I'm honest about my truth, whatever. What I would say is that if you're really reaching into your soul and aligning your actions and aligning your truth with your own soul, everything will be okay. And as you stop looking, I had to stop looking for validation from those who are living what I see to be a life of limitation. Like, I will never be validated. My journey will never be valid to some people who mean a lot to me.
Yep.
And that's okay. And I can love them where they're at. And I can choose to navigate relationships in a self-empowering way, being vulnerable only in those spaces that are safe and dialing back the vulnerability in spaces that aren't safe. I can mindfully navigate relationships so that I feel that I'm self-honoring, that I'm also at the same time extending grace for people who are at a different point in their journey than I am. Mm-hmm. So, like the tools, my testimony is that we all have the tools. The tools are there, whether we are aware of them or not. We might not yet be aware of them. And I would say at the beginning of my transition, I wasn't aware of them, but have developed them. The tools are there for us to both stand in our truth, align ourselves with our soul, and show up in a self-honoring way in relationships that might change, that might feel uncomfortable, that we might be judged in, or lovingly send those off. Whatever that looks like is going to be okay if you build the foundation of I am resonating with me and I'm being mindful in my path. I'm being thoughtful in my path. I would say if you are building that foundation, it's all really going to be okay. And you're going to feel more powerful. You're going to feel more magnetic. You're going to draw relationships into your life that will fill the gap, that will fill, maybe these people are limited in the way that they're thinking about you. And so they push away from you, or you decide that relationship is no longer filling you in a way that's healthy. People will show up and they will fill the space. It's just a universal truth and principle of love that you will make space for healthier relationships. So it's just all going to be okay. And I wish I would have really known that. I felt like I was taking one step and I was scared and I chose to believe that it was right for me. And then I would take one step and every step was so scary. But if I could have someone, like if someone's hearing me now, I would just, if someone's so scared in that space, I would just want to hug them. And I would just want to say, it's going to be okay. Like, listen to what your soul is saying. Listen to the experiences and the people that are trying to help you awaken and expand and transition in whatever way that looks like for you right now, out of a healthy relationship, out of a religion, out of a workplace environment that's not healthy, out of a certain paradigm in parenting that's not healthy, whatever that is. Your soul is that foundation. And if you align and partner with that energy, everything else is going to be okay.
Yeah. I love that. There's a saying that Gary Zukav has in Seed of the Soul that I kind of memorized. Well, I'm not going to probably say it verbatim, but it really comes down to compassion. That's the whole reason we're here, is to learn it kind of for ourselves and recognize it in ourselves. Because until we have that self-compassion, we can't bring it to the space of others. And until systems have inclusivity and compassion for diversity, it's impossible for that system to evolve. So basically the saying goes something like, you can't have compassion for yourself without also having compassion for others. Like they're very interconnected. So as soon as the moment that you do have that compassion for yourself as a natural byproduct or as a natural outgrowth of self-compassion, you now see the world with compassion. And I think where we go wrong in the systems and subgroups and cliques and churches and hierarchies is it's too, we preach love, right? And we preach compassion, but the individuality of it is not recognized in everyone. So yeah, so it's like kind of like that. As soon as you're compassionate with yourself, as soon as that system is compassionate with all the individuals in it or who want to be in it, then anyway, it's just that natural outgrowth. So and then by in the reverse, you can't be compassionate with other people until you've been compassionate with yourself. And I think that that's where the bravery comes in, is you become emboldened when you embody that compassion. You become naturally tolerant, naturally accepting and non-judgmental and non-dualistically thinking, because one of my greatest teachers, Nithya Shanti, who I've interviewed on this podcast, he's taught me over the years that God is nuanced. However anyone wants to define God, right? He meets people individually. So the nuance becomes, I was talking about those two camps of people that want to have an opinion that you trigger. The people who are compassionate in that subgroup of compassion, you'll trigger more compassion in them, right? The people who are in judgment and dualism and kind of want to operate in more of that structured template of right, wrong, good, bad, whatever, they're not going to go to compassion. They're missing the whole mark. And so again, they will keep getting people and circumstances that show up in their path that bring that to them in a compassionate way, because that's how the universe works. The universe isn't like, you loser, you don't get it. I'm going to punish you with this experience. No, it's very compassionate. And I love the things you've been sharing because it's reminding me that we are never brought to the next level. Like we're never given a life experience to bring us to the next level until we're truly ready and until we're strong enough to see it. And it's almost like our guides on the other side are waiting for us to say yes, like to that, and that strengthening, like, well, we're just going to be prepared for it. And you talked about tools. We all have these tools. We just don't know we have them yet until we're put into that experience where we have to draw from those reserves that we already have in and around us. So, Leah, this has been amazing. Is there any last thoughts or anything that's coming to you intuitively of what you want to add to the conversation before we kind of wrap up and direct people to your offerings as well? I know that now it's that same dynamic you were setting up in your compassion for people who were in the middle of these crises and earth shakes in the soul and questioning and needing support and comfort. You're doing that now through as a coach, like you are transitioning into being a coach for people who transition. So yeah, love to hear what you can share with us there.
Yeah. Oh, I just feel nourished by what you're sharing. It's just speaks to me. It really does. I just couldn't agree more with what you just shared. Yeah, it's this feeling really of being cradled by the universe that I've had. That phrase keeps coming to me, that I am cradled by whatever the all-knowing source of love. Some people might call that God. We have different ways that we call the love and the expansion and the growth and the light. And I have felt cradled in my forward moving to kind of feel into what the next step for me would be. And the question that I've asked is, where do I find joy? Where do I find joy? Where do I find joy? What brings me joy? And for me, I found a lot of joy in, when we did the podcast, we really were not prepared for the response. We had no idea. In fact, we finished the first podcast and that it was like 7.5 hours or something. We had planned on it being like 2, right? And in fact, during the podcast, I was texting, trying to get people to pick my kids. It was unexpected, but we really, really did. And we ended the podcast. The first things Cody said is, I think we just wasted your time, John.
Oh my gosh, are you kidding me? I was relishing everything you guys were.
It's that feeling. It's this earthquake in the soul though, right? You've just put your whole vulnerable life out there in the most vulnerable, scary thing you've gone through.
Oh, I can't imagine.
You just don't know, and you're just bracing. You don't know what you're bracing yourself for. We didn't know, which was a good thing. But anyway, we weren't prepared for what happened. That was kind of our feeling. We hope we didn't waste your time and your flight out here and everything. But what ended up happening is just engagement with people in transition. And for me, that really needed to evolve from really a lot of conversations online into more helping people a little bit more one-on-one, which really moved into me asking myself if the right path would be for me to move into coaching people. And the question that I just kept asking myself was, can I stay in balance in my life? Which balance is an illusion, but I feel like I'm in a good space of self-honoring and family honoring and filling these roles. And can I take this on in a way that can really serve people? Because I think I'll find that joy. The answer for me ultimately, after months of kind of pondering, was yes. And so and there have been a lot of other yeses. Yes to I'm now volunteering in the NICU at a hospital. I'm doing yoga every day. There's been a lot of yeses to things that bring me joy because, like you just shared, when we have self-love and compassion, we're able to, I think, just operate at a different frequency and give that back out into the world in a different way. So I'm going through the Life Purpose Institute through a professional coaching program intensive that I will, part of that will be flying out to San Diego, and I'll be doing that in the beginning of November. So I'm really excited to be hopefully able to help people in a way that's really meaningful for them, that helps them to grow through transitions, whatever it is. I'm having a child, I'm parenting now, or I'm rediscovering this passion and I don't know how to bring that into my life. We're all engaging in transitions all the time, whether we know it or not.
It's part of growth and change. You have to transition if you're going to change.
Yeah. So I'll be doing that. Did I kind of get off on a tangent there? What was the other question?
So you've transitioned, because I believe the greatest experts are the ones who have lived experience around whatever they're sharing. And you have gone the gamut. Mm-hmm. You've gone into the depth with transition from, out of religion into your spiritual soul path, into spirituality. So now you are doing that. You're holding space to do that as a coach for others.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It really feels full circle for me. And I know it feels like where I've been called to be, where I've been cradled into being in this space. Mm-hmm. And it really feels like the right next step. It's kind of like with the support group. It was like, okay, what's the next best step now to use this journey, to use this suffering to help? And for me, I feel very similar to how I felt then, is like, what's the next best step that can help others and bring me joy? Like, genuinely, I feel joy. I think we all do when we help others in a meaningful way. That's how we were designed, I think.
Yeah. And if we never get the validation that we're seeking in the exterior world of people sitting down and going, you know what, like the people we love, for instance, or our tribe, our old tribe, whatever, people who genuinely thought of us a certain way. Now we're not doing that certain thing they know us to do. If they never validate that for us, the highest way that we love them is to not continue to seek that validation, but to become the highest expression of ourselves in the space with them. In other words, we love them and we allow them to feel what they feel, as difficult as it is. And then we, like you said it so beautifully, we send them off. We, in love and honor for where they are at. And the offering is there for them to advance and expand, but we might not be the person that does that for them. And that's okay.
Yes, we might not be that person. Yeah. And I think that that's really key. And I think that's a great final point, is what you just said. I think for me, realizing it's not my job, it's really not anyone's job to move anyone else into a space, into growth, into expansion, whatever that might look like for that person, whatever we think that means for that person. Yeah. It's not really our job to pull them there, right?
Yeah.
We can welcome them there. We can step into a little bit of vulnerability and see if they're ready to go there. But releasing ownership, because in the beginning, I would feel like I have to tell everybody, oh my gosh, like these people don't know these things and I have to tell them. And that really weighed heavily on me. And I went through what I would consider a real spiritual experience when I felt spoken to, if you will, where I realized this is not your cross to bear. This is not your job. Like, release it, let it go. You have no idea what their soul is after. It is not your job to speak about truth claims, to speak about what you know, to argue, to be in that energy. And so that's helped me with just like letting it go. Like that's not my job. And it couldn't be my job because that's just not the way it works. Like I can't take that job from someone else. I can't take ownership of anyone else's journey. That's an illusion. So coming to the realization that that's an illusion, and that has really helped me to either send off relationships in love, or for the relationships, there are relationships we can't send off. And then, so just to circle back to offering grace and love, but also self-protecting in deciding skillfully what vulnerability we're going to offer in those relationships, because it might be best to have boundaries so that we're not inflicting pain or receiving pain that's unnecessary to suffer. So it might mean in this relationship, we're going to put a boundary around talking about these topics. And that's okay. I love you. I honor you. And whether you can honor me or not has nothing to do with whether I honor myself. And so that's okay. It's okay. And it's so freeing to realize I don't need them to approve of me, because I now fully approve of me. So I can let that longing be released.
Yeah. And that is one of the most difficult attachments to release, is that need we have. It's very human. Because just as we are wired to in oneness with life and everyone. But when you forge an intimate connection with another human being and they're not seeing things the same way you see them, the act of releasing is actually a high act of grace for that soul and for yourself. And that compassion then becomes magnified. So, wow. Well, thank you again for gracing us with you. And I'm sure we will align in the future and probably projects. And I know you and I both want to go see higher teachers and do things that are stepping out of, I guess, the norm of just the programming on all levels, and finding people who really get it and who are the advanced teachers on this planet. There's many of them, many of them in different walks of life and stations. So it'll be fun to explore that and to continue our conversations as friends and as those who desire to help people and hold space for their evolution. So you're a blessing. Thank you, Leah.
And thank you, Cherie. And something that I want to thank you for, and I want to thank your listeners for as well, is that I feel like there was someone on an Oprah podcast. I don't recall his name, but what he shared was, when a soul awakens, not to say this person's better. I don't want to frame it in that way. But when a soul awakens and taps into that energy, that act of growth, because we're all so interconnected, is helping turn light bulbs on. And I had this imagery and this feeling, and this was in the depth of my dark night of the soul, really. In that moment, when I heard that, I felt like my growth had been offered to me through the energy, through this wave of an awakening that is expansive, that is global, I believe, an unearthing, if you will, of former systems and ways of looking at things, this uprising, this uprooting that I know this energy you feel and I feel, and you're a part of that. And I know your listeners are a part of that. And I just want to say that there's power in that, and that I honor and send gratitude out to all the people that I don't know, that I didn't know, whose choice to step out of binary linear systems, to ask the questions, to do the soul work, woven together, sent that energy to me. I really believe that. And I hope that I can be a part of that tapestry, that I'm weaving my thread in the fabric of sending that to others along with you, so that more light bulbs can go on, so that more joy ultimately can be experienced, and so that we together can create what Eckhart Tolle would call a new earth.
What a beautiful representation and encapsulation of my whole goal on this podcast. Thank you for affirming that. And thank you for turning light bulbs on, because you're doing it in beautiful ways. Interesting that you bring up that book, because that book Eckhart Tolle's New Earth fell off the shelf for me about, I think, almost 15, 17 years ago. I was at the grocery store of all places, and it was on a table of books on sale, and Spirit said, get it. And how I read it now versus how I read it then is,
Me too.
And that is what we are creating. Ultimately, we are all advancing as a collective. We just, it seems to be a lot of polarity, and there probably is, but it really is just about all of us moving together as to create this new space, this new earth. And there's lots of constructs and paradigms around what that means and what it is, but it's just allowing each other to be human, and allowing to see the divine in each other too. And that beautiful space of, you be who you were created to be. I will be who I was created to be. And if it's different, it's beautiful, and it's okay. And it's more than okay. It's the way. So thank you again. Thank you again.
Thank you. Thank you.
So awesome when you connect with people who are really in the trenches of doing the real soul work. What I loved about my discussion with Leah is we are these beautiful spirits of light. We are already that sacred whole vessel that we are so actively trying to affirm and seek in so many other ways, shapes and forms, systems, and other people. When if we just really feel into the fact that we are, I mentioned this on my interview with Leah, like I named this women seeking wholeness, not because it's something outside of us that we're searching for, but because it's so essential to our expansion as individuals to seek it to the degree that we actually discover it was already within us all along. And that discovery is part of the purpose of life, is you are that which you seek. You are that. You are the I am. You have the power within you to have that sovereignty as a soul and to connect in with your creator so that you can show up to serve and alleviate suffering for the collective, for the one, for the all. And you are all. So I hope that you will feel into that for yourself this week and really internalize your magnificence, that you already are what you're trying so hard to prove to yourself that you are and to others. So thank you for your time this week. Please look in the show notes for Leah's offerings and where to find her and her beautiful work that she's about in the world. Until next time, have a great week.